Just want a round of applause. I just spent $495 worth of beer. Yeah! Not a drop touched my fucking lips.
Welcome to the Riff Crew. I'm your host, Steve Mitchell, back for another big episode here with the Riff Crew. And joining me, as always, is the man of many talents, Skull. How you doing, mate?
Hey man, greetings, ladies and gentlemen. As you know, in Cyberland, as you know, this is Skull broadcasting from the past, present, and future in a chamber of the cosmos. Here with my good friend Steve Oz from Ozland. I'm an on-again, off-again DC bomb rock band Black Manta. I've been in the scene for over 35 years. I also worked at the Smithsonian for 20 years and have incorporated my love and passion for history with my love and passion for music. So as usual, really excited to be here. And we have a special guest with us here today, Steve Lorber. He was ex Pentagram manager in the 70s and also a local DC DJ. And it's great to have you here with us today, Steve.
Thank you, Skull and Steven, for having me. Let's have some fun. I'll be glad to tell you as much as I can remember.
Right on, man. It was the 60s and 70s, right?
Well, yeah, it was. I mean, for this podcast and what we'll be discussing, it'll probably, for me, it started in the early 70s, pretty much.
You want to give the audience out there a little history about yourself and how you got started in music?
Well, like everyone else, I was a fan. I bought records. I grew up in Lahore, Pakistan, so I had a kind of unique vision of music. It was coming at me from Radio Ceylon, the BBC, and all kinds of oddball sources. So I had a wide influence, a wide range of influences, not to mention local Pakistani film music. So I grew up in the 60s, and then I came back to the United States around 1969, and I had a year of high schoolers, and then I went to Georgetown, I think in 71, and I was a student at Georgetown. And as soon as I got there, I was always into music. I brought a lot of records. My dormitory was full of records. I remember the first day I was in the dorm, there was a guy who was playing the Velvet Underground, the Loaded album. And I said, I got to be friends with this guy. And he came over, and I had the Kinks' Victoria album. And so we were great friends. And then I found out that Georgetown had a radio station. And I thought, well, I've always wanted to be a DJ. So I applied to WGTB, which was a FM Georgetown University Underground station. And they gave me a gig. And I think I started around 74, I think this was 73 or 74. And I was involved as a disc jockey, had 2 or 3 different shows till the station closed in 79. And quickly after that, I jumped to another station in DC called WHFS, which was out of Bethesda. And that was a more commercial station. I had a couple of years there. And in interim, like during this whole time, like in the 70s, I was managing some bands. I was trying to become a student. I was flunking out, but I managed to stay with like a D average. I
Right.
graduated. When I finally graduated, they sent me my certification, and it showed that I was 5th from the bottom of like 300 students. I thought, well, guess what? I was better than 4 others. And I said, I'd love to know what happened in the lives of those 4 other guys or 4 other people. So that's kind of what I've been doing. I wrote for some fanzines. I put out some records, which I'll show you. I managed a couple of bands, the Slicky Boys, which is a Washington, D.C. garage punk band. I worked about 2 or 3 years with Pentagram, and they evolved into a hard rock band called Sex that I was involved with. A lot of things happened. So probably best if you ask me some questions, Skull and Steve, and I'll do
Oh
my
yeah,
best to
yeah.
answer.
I got a whole list of questions, but I do want to go back. That's interesting. So
All right,
are
Skull.
you pack
I've just got a question because definitely, I don't know whether we will get a younger audience, but I'm just curious with those radio stations because obviously the reach, it depends on the reach of the signal. So I was just wondering how wide or broad were those radio stations? Like, was it multi-state or was it very,
Yeah,
very
good, good,
localized?
good question. WGTB, which was a Georgetown station, had at the time 50,000 watts. And I can tell you for a fact, we had people, it was out of Washington, D.C., but we had people in deep Virginia, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and even Florida listening to it. It was because it was radio waves, depending on weather, it really went over, but it had a for a college radio station, it had a very powerful and professional signal. And the funny thing about that particular station, after a while, Georgetown's a Catholic-run university, and they were getting upset because we had advertisements for abortion services, and we were all hippies, and we said things that bothered them, and they sold the station, and they sold it to a television company called C-SPAN, and they owned the station. The Georgetown sold it for $1 because it was such a conflict for them, and then C-SPAN ended up, or they sold it not to C-SPAN, DC University for $1, and DC University sold it to C-SPAN for $22 million. So that's a really funny story behind that station. But it was, as to your question, it was very powerful. The second station I mentioned, WHFF, was a commercial station. I really don't know the power of that, but I know, again, we had a lot of sponsors, so I assume it got a far range of listenership. And those were the days way before the internet.
Well,
When dinosaurs walked the earth.
So are you Pakistani, or were you an army brat? How did you end up in Pakistan?
Not Pakistani. Sorry about that. My father was I'm an American. I was born in New York, but my father worked for the U.S. government. He was part of a development, USAID, which we no longer have. But in the 60s, there was a lot of aid development in Pakistan. My father was a flood control expert, so he was working in water and dams and that sort of thing. So he just took his whole family, moved out there. That was his career, and I grew up overseas that way.
So it was nothing like the movie Spies Like Us, by any chance?
Spies Like Us.
It has a little bit of that. I mean, Pakistan's it's a crazy place. I mean, in the 60s when I grew up there, truth is stranger than fiction. Some of the things that people did and what happened there and what I saw, I had a hard time when I finally moved back to the United States to acclimate the way I saw the world, because I was an American guy growing up in a Pakistan culture, and I went to an American school, but there were Yugoslavs, Australians, Germans, Swedes, you name it, Africans. Every race and nationality, I went to school with them because the American school was the best school. So all the foreign dignitaries and their people that lived overseas and worked in Pakistan, they sent their kids there. So quite an experience.
So when you moved back, did you get to see any of the greats like Hendrix or Cream or the Doors, or any other, name the first
Yes,
few cool bands you saw when you came back to the States?
One of the first things that I did was we moved to New Jersey because my father worked in New York City. So I had 2 years or a year or two in Fair Lawn, New Jersey. I would catch the bus over the bridge, and I used to go to the Fillmore East. And I remember seeing Moby Grape. I saw Mountain. I saw Cactus. I saw Humble Pie, incredible string band.
Right on.
I used to love to go to the Fillmore because, I heard about it, and I realized it's only a bus ride away. So I did go to as many of those kind of concerts as I could.
Well, I'm a huge Mountain fan, and I'm a huge Cactus fan, so that's killer, man. That's really awesome. But yeah, I mean, just going back to how you got started in music, we wanted to focus a little bit on the whole Pentagram story. I don't know if you've heard about it, but Bobby's kind of blowing up a little bit on the interwebs, on the meme side. There's a lot of weirdness going on the internet, and he kind of went viral for one of his live performances, and so he's everywhere in the ether right now. So
well, it's funny the influence of the internet and how it's changed. I mean, when I knew Bobby, when it was in the 70s, and he was quite a character. And, as time goes on, we've talked over the years periodically, and he's a real character, but he was tough in those years. In Pentagram, it was difficult. Gordon Fletcher and I were managing the band. I'm guessing this had to be 75 through 77 or 78, somewhere in that neighborhood of time. I was managing a local band called the Slicky Boys, and I had my radio show called Mystic Eyes. on the Georgetown WGTB station. And somehow Gordon Fletcher and I became friends. He was a writer for Rolling Stone, well-known writer. And he loved hard rock and heavy metal, which wasn't exactly my cup of tea. I was more a garage guy. You know, that was my thing. And then punk, I was playing a lot of the British punk stuff as it was coming out. And he said, why? He kind of proposed it one night. We were out drinking or something. And I said, sure, why not? Because, you know, I was 22 at the time or something, 21. So we managed Pentagram, and I'll tell you, that was for about a year, 2 years. And that was it was an amazing journey to say the very least.
Well, is it, so how did that whole thing happen? How did how did you get involved with managing them? It was just like,
Gordon was already in managing them, and Jeff O'Keefe, the drummer, very talented, perhaps one of the most talented musicians I've ever known. He was very friendly with Gordon, and I think Jeff was instrumental in kind of drafting Gordon to manage the band. And somehow Gordon wanted me to help him. I remember I knew about Pentagram, and I knew them. I think I might have met Jeff once or twice. As a matter of fact, I have a funny story. Jeff won't remember this, but the first time I actually met Jeff O'Keefe, he was at our station, which was WGTB. It had to be 1973 or 74, and he was carrying the single of Under My Thumb. I think it had an orange blank label. And he was trying to get a DJ, Bruce Rosenstein, a friend of mine who really liked these progressive British bands like Genesis and Man. And he was there. He was friendly with Bruce, I guess. And he was hustling Bruce on the Pentagram single. And Jeff was quite a salesman. And I remember walking into the studio, either I was hanging out between classes or I had the next shift. And I said, boy, that looks like a really cool record. Could I get one? So he gave me one, and I took it back to my dorm, and I really liked it. I thought, what a great version of Under My Thumb. I forgot what the other side was, but that's how I first met Jeff.
that's awesome. That actually, you kind of read my mind and skipped ahead a bit, because I was going to ask if Pentagram ever even really got any local radio play.
They got it. I played their record. I mean, I played a lot of the bands that I helped. It's probably a little, but I played it a lot. I don't know. There was only one guy I remember who had a really hard rock heavy metal show. I don't know if he played it. I played it because Jeff was my friend, and it was a good song, and it was a Stone song, and it was powerful. And I may have played some other Pentagram songs on Reel to Reel that Jeff gave me, because he was a frequent visitor to my show.
So that's interesting. So I mean, the whole image so what did you think about the name Pentagram? Everybody already knew about Black Sabbath, but the name Pentagram and the image and the sound, I mean, they were a pretty heavy band for the time, right?
At that time, 73 or 74, when Gordon and I were managing Pentagram, the focus was try to make the band get a hit record or try to get a commercial sound. The goal was to get a record deal and to break big. I don't think they were into any kind of, at that time, any really kind of a doomy sound or anything. They were more of a hard rock band with good songs. And we had a guitar player, Marty Iverson, played with Vincent McAllister, and he was really good. And they were great. And then we went into underground sound. Gordon and I took the band, and I think some of the tracks are on the Pentagram Last Days 2 or Last Days 3, one of those compilations. But I'll never forget, Jeff wrote a song. One day he called me up. He said, you got to hear this song. And we would joke about certain stupid stuff. And it was called Teaser. And what a great song. The demo is great. And then when Vincent was able to put his guitar on it, the break between Vincent and Marty Iverson, to me, is like one of the best examples in hard rock of two twin guitars dueling each other, kind of like a Scorpions thing. But even in my opinion, on that one song, Teaser, that the guitar interlude breaks were incredible. Worth listening to, checking it out. You probably know the song, but if you went back and listened to the guitars, they're amazing.
Right. Now that's interesting. I know there was a lot of band rotation. So at that specific time, so when you were managing them, it was it was a two guitars.
It was Greg Bain, I believe, was bass. Vincent was the main guitar player. Bobby was the singer, and Marty Iverson was the other guitar player, and Jeff was playing drums. And that
Okay, yeah,
happened until. Go ahead.
I was going to say a lot of people think of like the classic lineup of just the four, but so Marty was in the band for a couple of years during that time.
Marty was, yeah, he was in the band, and he went with the band into underground sound, and he stayed. I remember then when Pentagram broke up, when it became an issue and Bobby was creating issues for the band, Marty left. He was the kind of guy, he was really, how do you say it? He was one of these guitars for hire. He was an excellent guitar player, but he had a family, and I think he needed money, and he looked at it as kind of a session gig, and we couldn't afford to pay his price, I think. So he left. And then Gordon and I, we convinced Brett Reese of a band called The Boys. You probably have heard of them. I think
You're reading my mind again, but go ahead.
Right. So Brett Reese joined, and Pentagram then became a band called Sex.
Oh, okay. Awesome. So just real quick though, during, as far as the lineup goes, were you ever familiar? Did you ever know Randy Palmer? I mean, he was kind of in for like a minute, right?
Randy, I knew Randy. Randy is one of the nicest guys in the world. He used to call me up, and he would ask me about music and songs. And he was like, he was just a sweet human being. You couldn't find a nicer guy than Randy. And I didn't know him musically. We mostly talked. He would call me in because I was a manager and he knew me. He wasn't with Pentagram, but I met him with Jeff, and I met him at the practice place. And he was just a nice guy. And we had some kind of a friendship. So he would just call me on the phone and we would just chat. But he was not playing with Pentagram when I was managing them.
Right. But he did. Have you heard of the Demon? Did you ever get a chance to check that out?
I listened to it online, and it's pretty heavy. It's a totally
it's
different
really lo-fi.
direction.
It's really lo-fi, but it's awesome.
No, I mean it's probably pretty good. If Jeff was involved and Randy was involved, I'm sure it's excellent. I don't remember specifically what it sounded like, but I have heard a track or two.
Yeah, because I was also wondering because those guys were great players, if any of them were ever tried to be scalped by other bands, or anything like that. There was obviously there's supposedly like the legendary Kiss thing where, Kiss was interested in them. Was that during your period, or?
No, that was right before I was involved with them. There were a lot of local hard rock bands, and they all came out and watched each other, but they're really, gigs were kind of hard to get. Hard rock was, you have to remember it, in those days, it was punk rock was just happening, and new wave was happening, and it was muscling out a lot of the hard rock sound. So you had to be really good. And I remember our focus was, let's get good songs, let's get a record deal, let's see how far we can go. That was the Pentagram that I knew, and that was with, and then we had a singer after Bobby left called McKee. I forgot his last name, but his first name was McKee, and he was a great singer. And he was in Sex, and they were dynamite.
That's cool. We're going to talk about Sex a little bit later on, but I'm just interested for all the people out there. I mean, so when you're managing a band, like, what is that like? It's probably like corralling cats, trying to get everyone together. And I know, like, notoriously there was some, drug issues. I don't know if Bobby was a full-on junkie at the time. I mean, it's pretty common knowledge. If you saw the movie Last Days Here, that the documentary about him and Pentagram, his drug abuse and all that. I mean, well, what was it like back then?
Well, there was a lot of drug use, I can tell you that. I mean, that was happening.
But I mean, there's weed, and then there's heroin. You know what I mean? There's like,
I personally didn't see any hard drugs being used.
Oh.
I mostly was more friendly with Jeff, and I don't think Jeff did drugs at all, quite frankly. I
Mm.
know Bobby did. I think Vincent and some of the other guys would get high, but I always thought they were smoking pot. I mean, I don't really don't know. I didn't socialize with them enough
Mhm.
to, because I was a manager, so I had to keep a relative distance. I liked them as people, but I wasn't their friend. I was trying to work with them and to get gigs for them and to see that they
Sure.
had the right equipment and they were there on time. So I wasn't really monitoring them a lot of what they were doing when they weren't working.
Yeah, yeah. So how were you guys like funding the band? I mean, did you ever get any like how many gigs do you think they played during that period? And did they ever have any like high profile gigs during that period?
Well, luckily enough, I can't remember the exact circumstances, but all the band members either lived at home or they had gigs or regular jobs. So the funding of the band was, Gordon and I try to raise some capital, usually mostly from our families, but we were just going from day to day, trying to build a reputation by playing the few gigs we could get, and then saving money to go into the studio and working on demos and ideas. And that was the kind of track that we followed.
So you really believed in the band then. You really believed in them and you wanted them to succeed and thought that they were going to make it essentially.
Gordon and I thought that Pentagram and later Sex were the greatest bands we were involved in. We loved them. We thought they were musically, they could do a lot. Like I said, they weren't playing what Pentagram is doing right now. I've seen some
Sure.
current videos of the modern Pentagram, and it's
Hmm.
completely different from the Pentagram that I was managing. The Pentagram that I was managing wanted to record something like Desolation Boulevard by Sweet. We wanted that kind of a
That's a
thing.
great record.
Yeah. And that was kind of what we were looking towards. We wanted a big, powerful sound, a big, powerful commercial sound. And everyone was on board with that. So it's
Mm.
kind of funny because I know Pentagram is thought of by people that love the band as hard rock, heavy metal, doom type demons, but they were
Right.
just a kick-ass rock band. Yep.
It's the first days here,
That's
the
the band I
collection of like the
remember.
early stuff. Yeah. So did they ever get any high profile gigs during that period?
Unfortunately, not. We didn't. We were getting close, but
Mm.
there's always, the history of Pentagram is they get close to the fire, and then they just don't get, and they get burned somehow. It's unfortunate. I never got close with me, but too many things. Everything started looking really good, and then something would happen.
But there was a bunch of local gigs during that period then.
They played some great gigs. They were used to play at the Keg, a place in Wisconsin Avenue in Georgetown. And
Hmm.
there were some great gigs at the Keg. We had a booking agent for a while. They got some good gigs. They played, I think, high school. But, the problem I remember with trying to get them gigs was everybody said they were too damn loud, and I'll, and I'll never forget one time when you talk about raising money, one of the big things that we had to do, I don't know why I remember this kind of stuff. Sometimes you have these stupid memories that you don't know why you remember them. But I remember the answer to the fact that they were playing too loud was to get them this certain kind of an amplifier called the Music Man amplifier. Apparently, this amplifier got the sound of a Marshall, but it had a much lower volume level. It was able to create the actual wailing, the reverb, the metalish tones that are needed, but at a much lower volume. So we were trying to get money to buy these Music Man amps so that we could play more gigs in smaller clubs without the manager saying, "What are you doing? This is crazy. This is way too loud."
Okay, so they were playing a lot of Marshalls at that time then.
They were, I don't know, I assume they were Marshalls. They were stacked to the ceiling. I mean, there was still that concept that they wanted to be Blue Cheer. And I know Vincent used to love to crank, and he sounded great, but he would
Hmm.
blow the roof off of almost any small club.
Do you know if any of that was captured live during that period?
Well, the one thing that I have great hopes for, and I hope, Jeff, you're listening, Jeff. I'm just want to tell you I love you, Jeff. I'm sorry about the fact that in the past we may have had disagreements, but Jeff was in the incarnation of Pentagram that became Sex, and they have
Mm.
one tape out there which is a killer tape. It's amazing, and I begged Jeff to release it. He has the tape. He owns the rights to it. It's his tape, but I think the world is missing something, and he should be encouraged to release it. It'll be amazing when it comes out.
Oh, but they don't know if there was any like Pentagram stuff recorded during that period, like live stuff.
People, I think there were some fans that used to bring cassette players. I know one guy who's no longer with us, but there wasn't any professional recordings that I'm aware of.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, to follow up on the whole recording thing, so once again, there's another like notorious story about Bobby being maybe kind of groomed a little bit by the BOC guys, Murray Krugman and all that. Were you involved in that? Gordon Fletcher, that supposedly they recorded up in New York and it kind of fell through.
Gordon might have been involved with that, but that was before my time.
Okay, yeah, it might have been a little bit later because yeah, supposedly that I think this is like 78 or something like that, where they went into the studio and Bobby wanted to get his voice right, and there was like some friction and the whole thing kind of fell apart. Um, yeah, I wasn't sure if you'd heard about that story or not. But one of the
There was
things,
so many stories.
yeah, there's so many stories. Um, it's funny you mentioned the boys because that was actually going to be one of my questions is were there any other bands kind of like, I mean, you said there was punk was kind of breaking a little bit, and then there was other like hard rock bands kind of like Pentagram. But you're aware of the boys, and the reason I know about them is because my friend Joe Hasselvander, who ended up in Pentagram later on and also in Black Manta for a bit, he was in the boys. So do you remember how, anything about the boys and about those guys playing together
Yeah, I
or
remember the boys played a lot at the Keg, and they were great. And I remember Joe Hasselvander. I remember he was like a really kind of a heavy-handed drummer who played great, and
is a
he had
big
this way
guy?
of
A
holding
big,
his
big guy.
yeah, he had a way of holding the drum, coming down on his drums like this. And he played like I used to think it was slow motion, but he was such a hard, he hit the drum so hard, and it was a really kind of heavy sound. I remember his playing, and I remember seeing the boys, and Brett Reese was who the guitar player we pinched for Sex. He was a great guitar player. But I do
So
remember
did
seeing the boys; they were great, and Joe was he played the drums at the time. I think he's probably a multi-instrument guy. I've heard that he plays a lot of other things, but as a drummer, it was amazing to watch him.
yeah, do you remember if like did the boys and Pentagram ever play together?
They might have. I don't think they did, but they certainly played at the same venue.
Right. So you yeah, you weren't around by the time that Joe had joined Pentagram then.
No,
Oh,
um,
okay.
that
Um,
was I'd already that I was not involved in Pentagram at that point. No.
so and there was another question I wanted to ask you was so there was some recording going on at the time, like studio recording, because you mentioned teaser, and that was one of the things that I wanted to bring up, is that so you guys were working hard to get their name out there, get them on the radio a little bit, and get them to, get gigs, but you guys were going in the studio as well. Is there like, because I know that there's the Last Days Here 1, the Last Days Here 2. Is there and that's of course is on the teaser is on this, but so what was that process like? Where did you guys go to record that? And
There was
you
a
know,
studio in Largo, Maryland called Underground Sound, and it was under this guy's house. It was like his subterranean basement. I guess he was an engineer on the side. I think he had a regular corporate gig during the day, but we found out about him, and we went there, and it was great recordings. It was Great sound. We got a great couple tapes out. I think all the tracks though did come out on that album you just flashed, Last Days
Mhm.
Here. So there was only 5 or 6 tracks, and
Oh yeah, because I there's only one that actually went to like tests, right? Like was it Teaser was the only one that they made a test print of, or
they had a couple of test pressings and acetates of Teaser. Um, but basically it was just on the tapes, and Jeff got the tapes, and that's how they came out. I mean, we
oh
never
okay.
we never finished it. The band broke up. We never paid completely for them, and they were just languishing there, and Jeff wisely went and picked them up, and I guess that's how it he licensed them to that label that put them out. Relapse, I believe it's called.
Relapse.
Yeah.
Do you have any of those test pressings of Teaser lying around somewhere?
No, I don't. I think I had an acetate. It was a long time ago.
Right. Do you have any of the old Pentagram stuff on acetate or single or anything like that?
I think in my own collection, I have copies of each the Macabre single, and I
Right,
think I
right,
still have. I think I still have the original under my thumb that Jeff gave me so many years ago.
right. Yep. Well, yeah, that's we're kind of going full circle here. So towards the tail end of it, you said there was like, personality issues. Bobby was, things were kind of like falling apart a bit. You said you got the guitar player from the Boys, and Pentagram, and 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 then a different singer. And is there a reason why you guys changed the name? Well, I guess, yeah. Why did
Bobby,
it change? Yeah, all of that.
well, Bobby owned the name Pentagram, and after
Uh,
he left the band, when me and Gordon were there, the band wanted to continue going on, and it was at a crossroads, and they couldn't very well call themselves Pentagram because Bobby owned the name, and it really wasn't Pentagram without Bobby singing. So
mhm.
we must have had band meetings, Gordon and myself and the band, and we had a new strategy. I think Gordon was in charge of dreaming all this whole thing up. And that's when there was the birth of the band called Sex. In retrospect, I think that was kind of a bad choice for a name, but
It's
it
a
was
great name, though, man. It's a great
right.
name.
Well, I mean, it's like
It gets
I
your
guess
attention immediately.
well, that was the point at the time.
Mm.
So we went forward with that, and we got a new singer, McKee from Pennsylvania. He lived in Pennsylvania. He was a singer, and I think we had a bass player. Greg left. Andre Sokol played bass. Great bass player. Jeff was on drums, and Vincent was guitar player, and that was a powerhouse band. And there's one live tape that was recorded directly from the soundboard, and Jeff has it, and I'd like to see it come out to let the world check it out. It's certainly part of Pentagram fans will like it because Jeff
Sure.
and Vincent are prominently featured in that.
So were they still playing Pentagram tunes? Was it all original material? Was that recorded was that live or was that live in a studio or like in at a radio station? What was,
Well,
how did that happen?
as I recall, Jeff O'Keefe went into full gear and started writing songs. I know they did a couple of his original songs. I don't think they used any Pentagram songs. They might have used one or
Hmm.
two, but then they did like 5 or 6 of Jeff's originals as well as some cover tunes.
Okay. So was that live or was that at a radio station? Where was that recorded?
I think it was recorded at a radio station, but I can't remember exactly. It's a pretty good tape as I recall. I haven't heard it for 40 years, of course.
Right.
I'm dying to. I remember it. I mean, I remember it, loving it, thinking how great it was. But I hope it's as great as I remember it.
So would you say like what style was that and how long did they last and did they go into the studio or anything like that?
They never went into the studio. It was kind of like I was telling you, the suite. We were trying to get a powerful
Hmm.
hard rock sound,
Sure.
and the band it just kind of times were changing. Gordon, he didn't want to manage anymore, and he had some personal issues he had to deal with, and so he drifted away. And quite frankly, I wasn't capable as myself as a manager. Really, I got drafted in it in a strange kind of way. So I really couldn't keep it together. It was just everyone was going in different directions, and there was just not enough reason to go forward.
So sex kind of
Story of every
lasted,
band.
right? So
Yeah.
they lasted like about a year or something like that.
Year and a half. Yeah, something like that.
I'm really interested. I'm a merch guy. Everyone, I'm a collector. Was there ever any like merch type posters or like t-shirts or anything like that, like merch wise for Pentagram or Sex that you can remember?
I think we had some promotional photos, but I don't really remember. We never got that far. We were just trying to get gigs and just stay alive, and we didn't have any extra money to do stuff like t-shirts or anything. We were just worried about where the next gig was going to come from. It was hard. It was a tough market for really loud hard rock bands in the Washington area. Really, there wasn't that many outlets.
Well, yeah, there was the Barry Richards show. Did you guys ever try to get on that or?
I think that had already. I'm not sure if that was on during the time when I was managing. I think that might have already left the airwaves.
I got you. Well, from that period, do you have like any memories that really stick out, or you talked about one time that there was like a party house where you guys would just go hang out and just because at one, it's weird. I mean, being in a band, I tell people this all the time. Being in a band is like being in a family, a very dysfunctional family.
Very dysfunctional.
I mean, you love the guys, you love them, but it's a family, but it's a weird family, you know?
There was the only thing I remember that's what kind of like what you're trying to say. Um, Vincent and Greg lived in a house in Oakton, Virginia, and it seemed like that was where everyone would go. And I was in DC and I didn't have a car, so I was dependent on public transportation and rides at the time. So I didn't get out there that often, but the few times I did get out there was a lot of fun. It was kind of like I wouldn't say a communal living, but Vincent had a girlfriend there, and Greg was there, and other people were coming and going, and it was fun. But like I said, I didn't go there that often, really.
Right. So as far as like live gigs to go, is there one that from that period that you remember or jumps out at you? I mean, because when you listen to these guys, a lot of it, you would say is kind of live in his studio or like captured in one take. A lot of the first they hear stuff is just live in the rehearsal space. So, do you have any standout shows or memories from like just watching them live and just their power and their strength and their performance? Is there anything that kind of jumps out at you from that?
What I remember, I think if for one performance, again, it's so long ago, I don't know if my mind is playing tricks on me, but there was a place in Bailey's Crossroads in Virginia called Louis Rock City. And I think they got a gig there, and it was a really big place, and they sounded great and they looked great. So I remember that. And there was another place, Jeff would remember it, somewhere outside of Baltimore that was a gigantic, it was in a big mall, and it was almost like a dinner theater or something with an incredible stage. They played an amazing gig there because that was a kind of club that could hold their loud guitar sound. I mean, they could crank to the ceiling, and that was the place where it would sound great. But I just vaguely remember when you say, do you remember the gig? I remember the band looked great and sounded great on a big stage, which is what we envisioned for them, Gordon
Sure.
and I. A band that would look good and sound good in a stadium setting.
Yeah, I mean, we just interviewed. It's funny, we interviewed Bobby and Jeff just last year, and I mean, Jeff has like an encyclopedic memory almost. He remembers everything. It was an incredible interview. I feel very blessed, that I was able to interview him and everything. But he really does he really does remember everything. Says he might be working on a book or something like that, but I encouraged him to do that. I was like, if you have a memory like that and you can get all these stories down, you should do that.
Jeff is an amazingly talented person. I'm quite surprised that he hasn't been drafted by any number of heavy metal or doom bands because he can write material, he can play a multitude of different instruments. He
Mhm.
would be a gift to any band that he'd be in.
Yeah, I told him I was playing with the idea. I was like, because Joe's the same way. I was like, you guys should start a band together. Joe and Jeff, or Jeff and Joe, or something like that. But you never know. I have another question. This we ask everybody this question.
Sure, sure.
So, and we call it the writer question. Do you remember what's the weirdest, strangest, or funniest writer that you've ever seen? I mean, it could be either, pentagrams. They probably didn't have writers, or someone else's. Just off the
What
top of
exactly
your
do you
head.
mean? What exactly do you mean writers? What are you
The
saying?
writer is like, when the artist comes into town and they're like, we want a case of beer, we
Oh,
want,
the writer. I'm sorry. Okay, I hear. I
yeah,
hear
yeah,
you.
yeah.
We never got to the point where we were
You never
important
got
enough to get
right,
writers. So I wish I could tell you a story about that. I don't know.
right.
Nothing
It was
specific.
free beer at the bar, probably, right?
That was a gift if they were able to get that. Yes.
Right. Well, you did mention it a little bit, but did you did you stayed in touch with Bobby or Jeff over the years?
I actually talked to Bobby as recently as probably 2 or 3 months ago, and he told me something really interesting, and I hope it happens. He said that he was planning on recording um, an album of 60s covers like Music Machine and Tommy James and the Shondells,
Wow.
and he wanted
Yeah.
to do it. He was really into it, and he was telling me one of the guys in Pentagram, now I don't know who it is, what his name is, one of the newer guys is a guy who could play all the instruments and arrange it, and he was pretty enthused about it. And I told him, and the one song I thought was great that he wanted to do was a Beau Brummel song. Maybe it was Just a Little, or one of their hits, or Don't Talk to Strangers. And I thought, Bobby, what a great choice that is, that you're thinking that obtuse and obscure, and particularly for your audience and stuff. It'll really throw them for a loop if and when it comes out.
Right. I mean, if you ever had a chance to see Pentagram locally, would you go check them out?
Probably if they weren't playing too late at night.
Right, right.
Hard for me to stay up these days past 10 o'clock, but I would try. I would do it if it wasn't too far away. Getting to downtown to DC is kind of a nightmare now because there's so many barricades with all this government crap that's going on. It's not, the roads are all screwed up. It's really not as fun to travel downtown as it was 10, 15 years ago.
Right, and they're actually playing at the Maryland Death Fest. They played a while back, but they're coming again, and I hadn't seen them in a while, and so I'm going to go check that out. Steve actually said that supposedly they're doing an Australian tour.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Second half of the
yeah,
year.
Steve he films all of the local bands. He's filmed some big bands too. He filmed
I, I
Ross the
wanted
Boss.
I wanted to ask Steve. One of my favorite bands. I was curious if you ever seen them. Was called the Sunny Boys. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they had some great albums in the '80s, and I just wonder if they were still around and they play at all.
The name rings a bell from my childhood, but no, I never saw them.
And also, I used to trade and buy records from Phantom Records and Waterfront Records. Are you familiar with those record stores?
No, no, I think most record stores are long gone these days.
I know it's too bad. Yeah,
Well, Steve's in Melbourne, and
right.
those other places might be in Sydney.
There was another band called the Scientists. I think they were from Melbourne. Did you ever see or hear them?
No. I have to check it out.
You know,
He's on
they're
the
great bands.
he's on the younger side.
I know you've got a great history in Australia.
Well, I just wanted to ask you just if you have any last words or anything that you wanted to chat about or bring up.
Yeah, just a few things. I got something I wanted to show you.
Sure, sure.
These are just a few things that that I was involved with. The Slicky Boys were a DC band, and this was their first record that I put out in 1976. It's called Hot and Cool. It's a 4-track, 7-inch record at 33 with a 33 spindle hull. It's got a nice sleeve, really professional for 1976. I was pretty proud of it. That was my first. It's the first band I managed somewhat seriously. And then we put out an album.
They were more like a garage style. Like
they were garage
pop.
style. Right.
Yeah.
And then we put out a limited edition called Separated Vegetables, and it was 300 copies. This is their record. And this was goes for a lot of money these days. And the Slicky Boys are real big. In fact, they're playing in about 2 weeks. They don't play often. They just get together. They're pretty old, the guys. In 1983, when I was a disc jockey, after I left WHFS, I was involved with this crazy guy named the Dutes, and we put out a 45 called Acne. I've Got Acne. It was about his problems with acne. His brother was Evan Johns, who recorded a bunch of albums for Jello Biafra's Alternative Tentacles label. But this was like a local DC thing that we made 500 copies of. It was recorded on a Grundig recorder, open mic in a garage. It's got a great guitar break. And this is the last thing I did. I'm really proud of this. This was a band from Pakistan in the 60s called the Prince of Darkness. And they were my high school band between 67 and 69. They played at our high school. And I got tapes from one of the guys. And I said, I got to make this an album because they had great originals as well as covers. So we made a really great album with a booklet inside. And it's really a beautiful record. And if you like 60s garage stuff, it's well worth checking out. So these are
So
just a few things.
it's a Pakistani garage type
No, these
band?
are all American guys. They're Americans who went to the American school. As a matter of fact, this guy here became the American ambassador under George Bush to Indonesia. So, I mean, and he also was the president of Boeing Southeast Asia. They all have great histories. This woman here was, she worked in this FDIC. She was like the head of the FDIC for a while. This guy did a lot of video documentaries, mostly some music, blues stuff. And this guy is still working for the government. And this guy was a ballet dancer after he left Prince of Darkness. But it was a great band, and it was fun to put out. A few of my tiny achievements.
I'm just curious because your times, because I'm not sure that the style of music you normally focused on when you're a DJ, but who were the bands when those days when you were a DJ where you first heard them and it was like a wow moment? Like who were, like, obviously over time there would have been many, but who were the bands that really stood out?
The bands
like,
that really stand out that I remember were the Cramps, Big Star, the Stranglers, the Buzzcocks, the Clash, a group called Magazine, the American band. There are a lot of American bands called the Romantics. A lot of that, the New York Dolls, the Ramones. Those were the kind of bands that we were playing a lot of. And I, as a collector too, I played a lot of weird stuff, a lot of obscure 60s stuff, and a lot of one-off singles. I kind of, played stuff that I liked and which was weird. And I try to introduce people to different labels, different music, different styles of music, and songs that they probably wouldn't hear anywhere else.
And are there any hidden gems that, like those weird 7 inches, that people wouldn't have heard of that you would recommend?
Well, there's a lot of them. I can't. If you want to collect 7-inch records, I would try to start with the Cramps. The first one, what was it? Human Fly. That's a great record. The first Stranglers record is a good one. The Sex Pistols have a few good records. The Clash have a few good records. It's a lot of fun. I mean, you have to be a collector. A lot of these now are streaming for people that would choose to listen now. They could just dial it up on their phone or wherever, however they're collecting their music. But in those days, it was exciting because stuff was coming out almost every week. I'd go to the record store, or I had friends that would send me letters saying, "You got to hear this band. They just came out. They're called Skids or some weird band." And they turn us, "Oh, Joy Division. It's the biggest thing that's happening right now." And we'd get the records, and it was a lot of fun because the music, the B-52s. I remember introduced the B-52s, and I remember getting their first record, Rock Lobster, and playing it on the air, and that was a lot of fun.
And so for bands like you mentioned, like the Clash, the Ramones, were obviously the huge now, but did they blow up overnight, or was it like they were sleepers before they sort of hit the big time?
They were kind of sleepers, actually. The Ramones there was a word of mouth. There was like a couple of fanzines at the time. One magazine called the Trouser Press out of New York. It was really like they were totally focused. They started out focusing on British music, but then they focused on American music. So a band like the Ramones would get write-ups in the Trouser Press, and there was kind of more of a word of mouth vibe coming down. And managers would call clubs and say, "Oh, the Ramones filled the club. Can they play at the 9:30 in DC?" And it was kind of like how do you say it? A snowball going down the hill. It was just gathering more. The closer it got to the bottom, the more powerful it would become. You're right. They didn't become overnight sensations. They all worked and paid their dues.
Well, I wanted to ask you about the Slicky Boys. You're saying they're playing. Where are they playing?
They're playing in Silver Spring in about 2 weeks at a place called the Rosenstein Hall with 2 or 3 other bands. I believe it's a benefit, but I couldn't swear to it. I just saw the advertisement the other day.
You're gonna be in there?
I think I probably will go. Yeah.
Awesome.
I mean, they're friends of mine. I've known them
for
the main guys for 40, 50 years now.
The last time I saw any of those guys, there was a Skip Groff. I mean, for the audience out there that doesn't know, Skip Groff was a bit of a legendary. He was a DJ. He was also in the music the scene. He was involved with Pentagram before you came on board. He recorded some songs. Also the punk scene, the Discord scene, and he had a famous record store called Y&T. When he passed away, there was a memorial for him a few years ago, and I see the super hippified, like he's like 80 pounds or like super skinny scarecrow looking guy. And I think it's the guitar player from the Slicky Boys. He's very psychedelic the way he dresses.
Right. That's Kim Kane, correct. Yeah.
What's his name?
His name is Kim Kane.
Yeah. And I saw him, and that's the last time I've seen any of those guys. 20 years ago, they opened up for Black Market Baby opened up for them when they had like a reunion type thing at the 930 Club. That was when Tommy Carr was in our band, Black Manta, and we were just there to support him and all that.
Right.
But it would be cool to check that out, just to kind of support the scene. I mean, these guys have been around forever, a lot of these guys are like legends.
Well, you live in the area. You should come by. You should come to the show. I'll send you the information.
Right on. Come check it out. All right. Well, I think you have any other final thoughts, Steve Oz?
No, I'm good. It's just curious. The world's changed so much. Is just thinking back of what those radio days were like. I guess Skull, you were also involved for a period of time, and just how much the world's changed and the music scene's changed.
Oh yeah.
Radio is something that it's kind of like dinosaurs. The funny thing is there still is radio. There's internet radio now, so you could get on your online and you can listen to a lot of stations. I'm currently involved in a station in Tacoma Park called WOWD. I do a radio show once a month, and most of the people that listen to the show either listen to they have an archive where you can just download the show, or else they listen online and put it on in the background, either on their phone or their laptop or their desktop. So radio still exists in the form of an online presence.
Raised on the radio.
Yes.
You have any final thoughts, Steve?
Now, I'd just like to thank you guys for, letting me chat here and go off on tangents about things that are kind of obscure and obtuse, but hopefully we've, put a few pieces to the puzzle together of some of the things that you're interested in.
Well,
Sure.
definitely obscure, obtuse, maybe how you could describe us.
Well, it's great, and I've seen a couple of your podcasts. You guys are great. I think I saw the Randy Holden, I saw the Jeff O'Keefe one, and that was amazing. Of course, Jeff is a brilliant guy, so I think what you're doing is great. A lot of times when I see podcasts, the podcasters are more into themselves and their subjects, and that's all good and fine, I guess, to a certain amount. But to see people that really want to find out about history, to really want to let somebody tell their experience and get it firsthand, that's invaluable. It's good. It's good podcasting. It's something important. So I salute you guys for doing that.
I appreciate that. Yeah,
Thanks.
we're trying to capture the history, man. The posterity, for the posterity of it. Well, I just have one final thing to say, and that's remember, look to the stars, carry that torch of enlightenment, and strive to be a disciple of rock and roll and the Brotherhood of Orpheus. Peace.
Thank you.